All right, all right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. We are your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. My name is Robert Winfrey, and I am your host, per usual. Thank you all very much for listening. I deeply appreciate it. Even for slightly more down weeks, which is kind of what we got here. Not a lot of news. One event that is I don't want to call it bad because I think that's a little bit would be a little bit hyperbolic. Certainly got a good main event, but I don't anticipate this being a very long episode, and you can already see the runtime, so you might know how comical that is one way or the other. So yeah, it's I don't have a whole lot here, so anything you all know the opening drill. Anything you can do to help the product, any way you can interact with it, feed the unknowable abomination that is becoming the machine learning algorithm that runs everything. It's gonna get dark. It's gonna get real dark fairly soon. So there's that. Yeah, anything you can do on that front, always appreciated. If you want to reach out to me with constructive criticism, suggestions, questions, anything that isn't a long string of obscenities, you can find me on X/Twitter at WinfreyMMA. And if you know me personally, you can always reach out to me via other avenues, but on a more professional level, go ahead and use that one. Yeah, that's where that is. Sorry, there's not a lot worth, getting a big intro over, so let's jump right into it, shall we? UFC on ESPN. At the moment, I think it's UFC on ESPN Plus 100. It's not listed as being on ESPN proper, so this is the 100th at the moment event for ESPN Plus. Minor note about my coverage for this one before we get into the preview here. I got a thing on Saturday that I think is going to preclude me from watching the first couple of first couple of fights. I don't think I'll miss more than 3. So that's only for live. After it's all said and done, I will go back. I will put them back in. I will put them in their appropriate places. All that good stuff because I am a professional, darn it. So be aware of that if you were planning on following along live. I know that's not the biggest thing in the world that I do, but just so you're all aware, if that was a thing you were planning on doing, first hour-ish is probably not going to have a lot of updates over there because I got a thing, but oh, the horror of missing Zigomantis Ramska versus Nathan Fletcher or Andre Petrosky and Dylan Budka. It's breaking me up inside to not cover those live. I will have the vast majority of it, so don't be too worried about that. But, as I already mentioned, main event is pretty darn good. Welterweight action, Gilbert Burns and Sean Brady. Sean Brady was kind of, guy on the rise, undefeated for a while, looking good through the UFC against escalating levels of opposition, really good jiu-jitsu, pretty solid wrestling overall. And then he became Bilal Muhammad's only TKO victory in, 8 years or something. I think Muhammad has 3 stoppages in the UFC. I think that's either one, that might be his only one due to strikes. Either that or it's 2. I'm not going to bother looking at it. It's some absurd stat line like that. Bilal Muhammad, very good, very difficult fighter to beat. Not much of a threat to finish. Statistically speaking, at least. But he rebounded okay, beating Kelvin Gastelum. Kind of beat him pretty solidly before he Kimura'd him in the 3rd round. So he's trying to prove, lost to Bilal. That happens sometimes when you take that first kind of non-trivial step up in class. Then again, I don't know that I've seen a lot of him having learned a tremendous amount. Shouldn't say that. There were specific tendencies of his that Bilal Muhammad was able to exploit that I don't know Gastelum didn't really push him in the same way. Um, so there might still be some like open questions around a couple of those aspects. But he's fighting Gilbert Burns, former title challenger. Burns, 38. Um, Gilbert Burns had a good run for a while, got a title shot, and then got stopped in the third round against Kamaru Usman. Rebounded okay, beating Stephen Thompson. Had fight of the night with Khamzat Chimaev. He lost. I kind of thought he won that one. Did then, a couple of good fights in a row. Neil Magny, Jorge Masvidal. Then he had that weird fight with Bilal Muhammad, where like his shoulder got injured in the first round, and because MMA is MMA, they wouldn't like stop the fight. So he fought like was it first or second round? He fought either way, the majority of that 5 round fight like out of his opposite stance because his other arm was messed up. And then was doing pretty darn good against Jack Della Maddalena, and then kind of got caught in the third round. It was a very good fight. Burns is in a position right now where it's clear he's no longer the best version of himself, but it's not clear how much decline has set in. And that's a spot where he will test guys, he will beat some guys, but his last 2 wins were over other guys who are also, I say this with respect to both Neil Magny and Jorge Masvidal, they're both past their prime as well. Whereas Bilal seems to be more or less in his at the moment. I don't know how long that'll last. And Jack Della Maddalena clearly a force on the rise. And he's getting another guy who's on the ascent here instead of another older, slightly faded. Once again, I'm not trying to say that Neil Magny or Jorge Masvidal are scrubs. Far from it. But it's equally true that they are not the best versions of themselves. And Sean Brady, even if he's not the best version of himself, he is moving towards, in theory, towards the best version of himself, not away from it. So it's a good fight. This is a very solid main event, a very deserving main event. I am not complaining about this fight being on top of this card at all. My instinct at the moment is to lean Brady, but I don't know. Brady's chin is still a bit of a question mark, and he can be flustered. Burns' cardio is a bit of a... He's been 5 rounds before, so when I say it's cardio, I don't mean like, oh no, he falls apart. I just mean his efficacy goes down a little bit when we get to rounds 4 and 5. You could even argue round 3, actually. Let me take a quick look through some of his history. Because he's got plenty of decisions. That's not what I'm looking at. I'm looking at how, like, when was the last time he beat somebody in the 3rd round? Or the 5th round? And you actually have to go back to his armbar of Alex Oliveira in 2015. I mean, he's even won some of these 3rd rounds in these fights that he's won via decision. I'm just talking about, like, not efficacy, but potency, and there's a distinction between the two. If this were 3 rounds, it's not like Sean Brady's ever gone 5 rounds, though. That is still a fair question mark to have around him. But I'm a bit more comfortable having seen Brady grow in his game seems to kind of build on itself rather than peak and valley. It tends to go in a line upwards in general. I think if this were 3 rounds, I would lean Burns. I think the style that Burns has adopted recently is more heavily weighted towards 3-round fights. It's not quite shot out of a cannon, but it's very energy forward in the first round and the second. And then the third, he might win it, but it's very. I don't think the third round is usually his best round. I think part of what he does at the moment is puts out a lot earlier, whereas I don't think that Brady and I think that is more favorable towards 3-round fights. And I'm not sure how well that will hold up here because it's so hard to get a read off of the Muhammad fight because that arm injury like throws everything into question. And he looked really good against JDM. It's not like he was some shell of himself in that fight. He was doing very well there. And 3 rounds, I would lean towards Burns. 5, I'm going to lean towards Brady. Not by a lot, but what are the odds on this one have Brady as a favorite? Yeah, around 2-1. Seems a bit much, but somewhere between like minus 185 and minus 200. That's a little higher than I would think, but it's in the realm of acceptability. I don't think that's outside. I don't think it's crazy at all. So, yeah, good main event. Honestly, really good main event. Looking forward to it. Things go downhill a little bit after that. Not entirely. We're not like falling completely off a cliff here, but we're not, you know, it's an ESPN Plus card, not an ESPN card. Although I'm not sure how useful that distinction has been recently either. But that's a whole other thing. So the co-main event, sorry, Jessica Andrade and Natalia Silva. Big step up for Silva, actually. She's 27. She's been doing some pretty solid work. Her last loss was to Marina Rodriguez in 2017. That was outside the UFC. So she's on a, 11 fight winning streak? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, 11. 5 of those have been in the UFC. Wins in the UFC specifically over Jasmine Jasdavicius, Teresa Bleda, Victoria Leonardo, Andrea Lee, and Viviane Araújo. So a little bit escalation. She and Jasdavicius both seem to have continued to ascend. But Jessica Andrade represents a significant step up for her in terms of both name value and talent of opposition. Andrade, former champion down at strawweight, fought for the belt at flyweight. She's at flyweight here. She's on a 2-fight winning streak. Stopped Mackenzie Dern, got a split decision over Marina Rodriguez that I think, if memory serves, I agreed with her winning that. Had a rough stretch before that. But Andrade, just like a tank. But at 30, she's only 32. But, in fairness to her 32, she's been in some very serious fights in the UFC. She has 38 total fights and a career dating back to 2011. So she's been doing this for 13 years. In fact, it'll be just a little over 13 when this fight starts. Oh, no, hang on. Yeah, by the time this fight rolls around, it'll be just over 13 years she's been fighting professionally. She's been in the UFC since 2013. It was July of 13, so she's been here for a little over 11 years. And yeah, she came into the UFC at 9-2. So of her 38 fights, 27 of them have been in the UFC. Good grief. The point there is there's some mileage on that woman. when it comes to her to her fight career, and I don't mean that unkindly. That's just a statement of fact at this point. Because she's not only been here for a long time, she's had very serious fights. She's been in some wars. She's dealt damage. She's been dealt damage. Like that's been a thing. And unfortunately, part of her game at this point has kind of been figured out, or at least is very well understood. Silva could absolutely pose some very serious problems here. Let me have a quick look at this. Because Andrade is, what, 5'1", 62-inch reach. Silva, 5'4", 65-inch. That's a non-trivial 3 inches, especially if it goes both height and reach. This is still a big step up for Silva, and I'm hesitant to pick her here because of that. But Andrade, at the same time, man, only 32, but it's Indiana Jones told us, man, it's not the years, it's the mileage. And her mileage is significant. Odds are actually with Silva fairly heavy. They're asking for some trouble there. She's like 3-1 on some of these places. If you can get like a plus 2.5, like 2.5 to 1 payout on Andrade, that is asking for trouble. I'm gonna pick her though. That is, that's a tough one. Another fight where round count would make a big difference. If this were 5, I'd pick Andrade in a heartbeat. I'm going to lean towards Silva. I think I'll kind of go with the odds on that one, but I think that's a closer fight than those odds are set. Just going to put it like that. All right, featherweight, Steve Garcia and Kyle Nelson. Um, this is actually not a terrible fight. It's not going to turn a lot of heads, but this is not a bad fight. So Garcia, the Mean Machine, on a decent winning streak, 4 in a row. Got a pretty good UFC record, 5-2, nothing to sneeze at. Those losses were at lightweight too. He went 1-2 at lightweight, then returned to featherweight, and has been 4-0 since. Well, there's one lightweight bout thrown in there, but for the most part, he's been doing real good at featherweight. Chase Hooper, Shaila Nurdenbeke, the Milkiels Lacosta fight was up at lightweight. And then Seungwoo Choi, not that long ago, actually. Double check. Oh, that was at featherweight, right? Yeah. So he's taking on Kyle Nelson, who had a real rough start to his UFC career. I mean, he went 1-4 in his first 5. Lost to Diego Ferreira. No shame. Moved back to featherweight, lost to Matt Sales, beat Polo Reyes, lost to Billy Quarantillo, lost to Jai Herbert, fought to a draw with Doo Ho Choi. 3-0 since. He finally seems to have found his footing. Wins over Blake Bilder, Fernando Padilla, and Bill Algeo. I don't want to say completely that he's a one-round fighter, but he does fade down the stretch, and the first round and a half is when he's most dangerous. He's a big guy for the weight class, so it's not surprising that he has some durability issues in that respect. I think the odds are with Nelson, right? Odds are with Garcia. That tracks, actually. That's where I was leaning. If Garcia can get out of that first round, I think this is his fight to lose. I mean, he's not a huge favorite. I mean, make it sound like he was, some enormous. He's less than 2-1. Honestly, that's about right. I'll go with Garcia. But I'm not sleeping on Nelson. That man, he seems to have finally been putting it together, so and I respect that. Flyweights, Matt Schnell and Alessandro Costa. Matt Schnell. I like the guy, but man, his chin. He's 34, and he has suffered some losses that just feel like they shouldn't have happened. Um, just stopped in weird positions. I mean, it's so weird because sometimes he's very durable. Like when he beat Sumudarji, he lost very badly that first round, was losing the second, and then found a triangle choke late. He also got battered around by Matthews Nicolau and then knocked out by Steve Urseg. Costa, by contrast, that's where I was going with that. Let's see, 1 win, 2-2 in the UFC. His only, or was it Jimmy Flick that was the guy who just had like no chin? I might be confusing Schnell and Flick. I mean, Schnell, I am a little bit there. Jimmy Flick's the one who's like got knocked out because Costa knocked him out like with the weirdest hammer fists from half guard I've ever seen. Um, Schnell's chin is still kind of an issue. Don't get me wrong, but he's not. I apologize to him, man. Let me rephrase a little bit of that. He's. I respect his toughness, Schnell, but he's also taken a fair amount of abuse lately. Costa's been trading wins and losses. The losses are to Amir Albazi, who's probably en route to a title shot, and Steve Urseg, who did fight for the belt. This is if the pattern holds, this is the kind of fight that Costa will win. I don't have much of a problem picking him here. That said, Schnell, he's a pretty decent underdog a lot of these places. Jeez. Yeah, I'm going with Costa, but I do kind of pull for Schnell as on the emotional side of things. Lightweight. Oh, this will be. We got our parking lot fight of the evening. Trevor Peek and Yanal Ashmuz. This is going to be crazy. Peek 9-2. Throwing no contest in there, I believe. Yeah. 2-2 in the UFC. Won his debut against Eric Gonzalez, wild fight. Lost to Chepe Mariscal, beat Muhammad Yahya, then lost to Charlie Campbell. Ashmuz had he won his UFC debut. He's 1-1 in the UFC. Sorry, pardon me. Won his debut over Sam Patterson. Fought a heck of a fight with Chris Duncan. Was behind the 8 ball for most of that fight, but bless him, would not stop. These two. Yeah, this is. If you want to circle one that's just going to be entertaining, even though it's not going to be all that like high level. Trevor Peek has done a lot to try and not be the same guy he was when he debuted. I would argue in some respects to his detriment because he's trying to grow as a fighter, and when you have to do that in the UFC, that's always difficult, so I commend him. But I'm not sure that some of his new style at the moment is going to be all that beneficial to him. I mean, but I anticipate these two striking a lot. Again, you're looking for one that's just going to be entertaining, get the crowd at the Buffalo Wild Wings or whatnot if they're paying attention to it to like actually kind of be invested. This has all the makings of that kind of a fight. Odds are close. Odds lean towards Trevor Peak. I think I'm going to buck the odds on this one. I think I'm going to pick Ashmuz. I don't know. It's a close one, but Peak's defense, man, and the way he's been trying to like manage fights, his pendulum is still swinging between a guy who really likes to brawl and a guy who's trying to figure out how to win consistently in the UFC, and he's a little bit too far to the other end at the moment, and I think that's going to bite him here. I'm going to go with Ashmuz, and I'm prepared to be very wrong about that. Lightweight, sorry, still a lightweight here. Sorry, we have Rong Zhu and Chris Padilla, who I mentioned a little bit earlier. So Rong Zhu he had a little bit of a cup of coffee in the UFC back in 2021, 2022. Went 1-2. Losses to Kazula Vargas and Ignacio Bahamondes. In between those, he beat Brandon Jenkins. He missed weight a couple of times, which facilitated his exit. That would be my hunch. Since then, 4-0, including a run through the Road to UFC tournament, which is actually kind of a fun thing. I don't go out of my way to watch all the like, hey, here's how you get into the UFC because we don't sign people anymore. So either step in on short notice or go through the Contender Series or whatnot. But the Road to UFC stuff is actually pretty good. So he's re-debuting in the UFC here. And this is not a gimme. I don't think Chris Padilla is a gimme. But Rong Zhu is 25-5. Padilla is 14-6. 4-fight winning streak for Padilla, including his UFC debut. He beat James Yontop, though, who is I don't think Yontop. I don't know that he should really be in the UFC. I mean, the question of his position in the company was a little bit overshadowed on the last event because Yontop fought Barshev, and that was okay, but you kind of got the feeling like I don't know why you're here, buddy. And the UFC roster has like 700 people on it now, which is kind of nutty. It got that discussion around him got overshadowed because you had Medina, who just had like nothing at all to offer in his fight. I don't have much of a problem picking Rong Zhu here. I don't know, do I? Let me check the odds on this one. Odds are with Rong Zhu. I don't have much of a problem picking him. I don't want to discount Padilla, but if Rong Zhu can make weight, once again, I always reserve the right to change my picks if a fighter misses weight, but I'll go with Rong, and we'll see how that goes. That's the main card. It's a good main event. That's really Andrade and Silva is not bad, and Peak and Ashmuz is probably going to be at least entertaining. The rest of it, I don't have the highest of hopes, but there's not much there that makes me go, why? In fact, there's not a whole lot on this entire card that just kind of makes me go, oh, but why? So moving on to the prelims. Ryan Spann and Ovince St. Preux. Okay, here's my but why. But why? Why this fight? Spann, that man just cannot get consistent. He had a pretty good stretch going for a while, but last year lost twice. Got choked out by Nikita Krylov. Dropped a split decision to Anthony Smith that I seem to recall scoring it for Smith, but I don't think scoring it for Spann was like crazy. Then he got stopped by Bogdan Gushkov his last time out. He might just be on the other side of it. But speaking of on the other side of it, 41-year-old Oven St. Preux, who most recently got a split decision win over Kennedy Nzechukwu, lost to Felipe Lins, got a split decision over Shogun in 2022. That's just sad. I don't know what to. I have nothing for this fight. I kind of want to say Spann just because I think St. OSP is fairly washed at this point, but who the heck knows? Well, bet on that one at your peril because you're probably just going to lose money. Featherweight, Isaac Dolgarian and Brendan Marat. You know, I don't hate Isaac Dolgarian. 6-1, 1-1 in the UFC, coming off a split decision loss to Christian Rodriguez. That was a decent fight. And he beat Francis Marshall before that. That was a pretty good performance actually. Marat, 8-2. Dropped his UFC debut to Terrence McKinney in 20 seconds. That snapped a 3-fight winning streak. I'm very okay picking Dolgarian here. No disrespect to Mr. Marat, but if I just have to predict, yeah. Flyweights next, Felipe Dos Santos and Andre Lima. You know, this is not a bad fight either, actually. Lima 9-0, 2-0 in the UFC, wins over Igor Severino and then Mitch Raposo. He missed weight for that fight, though. That shouldn't have been a split. That was a weird split decision. I feel like that one should have gone his way fairly easily. Anyway, Felipe Dos Santos, on the other hand, 8-1. 1-1 in the UFC, lost his debut to Manel Kopp, and then beat Victor Altamirano via split decision. Kind of feels like Lima, doesn't it? Yeah, it does. All right, we'll go with Lima. His big issue might be the scale, because he's a fairly lanky guy for that weight class. I don't know how much longer he's going to hang around there. Featherweight next, we have Yi Zha and Gabriel Santos. So, see, Yi Zha, 25-4, 3-fight winning streak. Lost his. Okay, had one fight in the UFC. He lost a like road to UFC event, right? A finals. Yeah, to Jung Young Lee. He's won 3 cents. He like went back to got into another road to UFC event. 3-0 in that one to wind up here against Gabriel Santos. That's respectable. That's absolutely respectable. Santos 10-2. 0-2 in the UFC. Lost to Lerone Murphy and David Onama. Is he dropping down to flyweight here? Because those are bantamweights. Take a quick look at this. Where are you, sir? Okay, the loss to Lerone Murphy was all the way up at 145. He took that on short notice. I knew Murphy was not. Have a quick look at the Onama fight, because he got knocked out, which is never good. That was also at 145. Is he cutting 20 pounds? No, this is still at 145. Why did I think, did I transpose those somewhere? I think I did. Okay. Sorry. Forgive me if I'm just, okay. If I edited this, I would try to change that so I didn't quite look like a buffoon. For anyone who might have been yelling at me, no, this is always a featherweight. So clearly, okay, my mistake. Um, yeah, Yija. Um, Santos is a pretty hefty favorite. That's interesting. I'm gonna stick with Yija. Um, there's several of these I'm just very prepared to be wrong on. This is one of them. But I don't know. Santos has just not looked all that great lately. Straw weight next. Jacqueline Amarim and Vanessa Demopoulos. Let's see. Amarim 8-1, 2-1 in the UFC. Dropped her debut to Sam Hughes. Couple of wins since then over Montserrat Ruiz and then Corey McKenna. Those are solid. Demopoulos, on the other hand, 11-5. Two-fight winning streak, 5-2 in the UFC. Last couple of wins over Kanako Murata and then Emily Ducati. That was split. I don't remember how I scored that one. I think I scored it for Ducati, but ultimately couldn't, like, that was one of those that I just kind of feel like at the end you couldn't really get too upset about 29-28 either way. So not a terrible fight here. I feel like this is Demopoulos. Hang on, let me check something real fast. Because Demopoulos is 5'2", only has 59.5-inch reach. Amorim, 5'3", 68. Who's she fight? She's with American Top Team. Hmm. I'm gonna. I think I am gonna switch. I think I'm gonna go with Amorim. I'm gonna reserve the right to change my mind on that one, but yeah, I need to consider that one a little bit more closely. And then at middleweight, Andre Petrosky and Dylan Budka. Petrosky coming off a win over Josh Fremd. He lost two in a row before that. They have tried so hard with this guy, the UFC has. Um, it feels like they're kind of giving him another, like, hey, keep building yourself up, buddy. Because Budka 7-3 lost his UFC debut to Cesar Almeida. Um, yeah, they're kind of giving they're trying to give Petrosky a gimme, or another like gimme-esque fight. And I don't have much of a problem picking in line with that. And then kicking everything off, this fight was supposed to happen a couple of weeks ago, but it got moved. So Zygmantas Ramshka and Nathan Fletcher. Odds are with Fletcher. This is a couple of guys from the latest season of Tough that I didn't watch, and I don't think anyone else did. So I'll go with the odds and just go with Fletcher on that one. Don't have a whole lot to add to that. And that is where things currently stand. So I will have coverage of that Saturday. Come by, stop on the MMA Zone of 411mania.com per usual. So stop on by, say hello. Always appreciate that. Okay. Here's, I think, the only thing I really want to put some time into discussing, and even then I'll make it brief. So, John Jones and Tom Aspinall are continuing to chirp at each other. Tom Aspinall trying to angle for some kind of. He really wants to fight John Jones, and John Jones does not want to fight him right now. So the big fear, if you're Tom Aspinall, is John beats Stipe Miocic and retires. That's what you should be worried about. That's what the UFC should be a little bit concerned about, and Aspinall is trying to build up stuff in the sphere of public relations to incentivize John to stick around and fight him. I don't know how successful it's going to be, but Aspinall's putting in some work on that respect. John seems to be, uh, it seems to be getting to him a little bit. And I mean, Dana White's still out there going, John Jones is the pound for pound #1 fighter in the world, and I don't think that that's true because Dana's understanding of pound for pound is basically who, at the moment, is who do I think is the greatest of all time, and I actually don't dispute that that's John Jones, but that doesn't make him the best right now. So I don't know. That whole situation is just weird. But we'll keep an eye on it depending on how crazily it develops. The UFC seems to be getting ready to drop a bunch of fight announcements on us, so I don't have any right now, but I imagine in the next week or two. Um, it feels like they're going to do a bunch of that around Riyadh Season Presents UFC Noche at the Sphere in Las Vegas. That event, by the way, just they were struggling to sell tickets. They were horribly overpriced, even by UFC standards. It's an okay card, but it felt like trying to make this a celebration of Mexican fighting heritage and putting it in the Sphere and having the Saudis involved. Like it all kind of conglomerated into a mess that is not really generating a lot of interest. Might change as we get closer to it, but right now, like, there's a lot of really good Mexican fighters on there. It's a pretty solid card. I mean, Brian Ortega and Diego Lopez is going to be nuts. Uh, I mean, I don't actually care that much about Shevchenko and Grasso 3 at this point. And Marab and Sean O'Malley is the appropriate fight for that title. But it does seem to be lacking, like, I don't know. I can't quite put into words where it's sort of fallen short, but I think it's undeniable that it has. But it feels like that's where they're going to kind of wait to dump the back end of fight announcements on us. So we'll be keeping an eye out for that. All right. Yeah, that's kind of all the news again. Slow week, which I was welcome, actually. So let me check the old X machine and see if anything crazy is broken. If not, we will do plugs and get out of here. Okay, no, I don't see anything new there, so I got no plugs this week even, really. Usual spate of stuff, WWE SmackDown on Friday, UFC event on Saturday, but there is no Damn You Hollywood this week. Last week, we got together and we reviewed the new Crow movie, which, oi, what a what a terrible film. Just a terrible movie from its conception to execution, every step of the way, just mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake. Just, yeah, bleh. Terrible. So listen to us bury it over on Damn You Hollywood if you're so inclined. Next week we will be back here to review UFC on ESPN Plus 100, and we will preview UFC 306. Or again, Riyadh season Noche UFC. What a full preview next week. That's actually not, once again, not a bad card. It really isn't. Your main card at the moment is held together by. They'll just go with Grasso and Shevchenko as the main event if something happens to O'Malley and Marab, but that is not nearly the interest that those two have. Best two fights on the main card: Ortega and Lopez, and then O'Malley and Dvalishvili. The rest of it, I don't think it's bad. It's not bad. It's just, I don't know. It's not terribly inspiring. All I'm saying. But full preview next week. All right, that's it for me, everybody. Thank you all very much for listening. I appreciate the heck out of you. Stay safe out there. See you next time. Until then, continue to be well, be safe, and behave.